What's up, everyone? I'm Christian, one of the co-presidents of Entertainment Digital Media. Here with Alice, right?
Yeah, hi. Hello.
We are super excited today to be joined by Jon Sax. He's a booking agent at Liaison Artists in San Francisco. Liaison is a boutique talent agency for electronic music artists. And Jon is a U of M alum who graduated in 2010, did a bunch of different clubs here, put on shows at various venues around Ann Arbor. He's just an all-around awesome guy. So he's going to be chatting with us today about the music industry, where Liaison Artists sits within that industry, how COVID is shaking things up. And then we'll do some Q&A with the questions you all submitted, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end too for some open Q&A that any of you might have. But with that, I'll hand it off to Jon.
All right, thank you very much, Christian and Alice. Really excited to be here talking to Ross EDM today. So as Christian mentioned, my name is Jon Sax. I'm a booking agent at Liaison Artists in San Francisco. I graduated from Michigan in 2010 with a degree in economics and political science. During my time at Michigan, I was president of the Michigan Electronic Music Collective and also was the marketing director at Necto Nightclub. So we put together a lot of really great shows, did a lot of really cool events on and off campus. And I was able to also be an intern at Fleming Artists on Main Street, which was a folk singer-songwriter agency. So I've been on a lot of different sides of the coin, and I'll explain what all that looks like in a moment here. But let's get started. So in 2020, the electronic music business was reaching its largest point that it had ever been at. So let's see, before March of 2020, the electronic music industry was valued at over 7 billion United States dollars. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit. So when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, artist touring went from an overwhelming majority of annual income to a complete standstill. And the way that fans consume music and the way that musicians brought music to people has changed drastically. And we'll go into a lot of different examples in a moment. So nearly all the positions in the workforce have been affected. But before we can really grasp these effects, let's first define all the roles in the booking process. So I'm an agent, and the agent is the artist representative in a booking negotiation. I'm normally on the phone or sending emails to the talent buyer, who is the venue representative in a booking negotiation. So when the agent and the talent buyer decide to confirm a show, then I introduce the manager to the promoter. The promoter and the talent buyer are sometimes one and the same, depending on the size of the venue and the promotional company. And then at that point, the marketing strategy will be predetermined by the publicist and manager, and then they will go ahead and dictate how to best implement the venue's promotional team, street team, marketing, promoter, and whatnot. So the roles of an agent and the agency. So I take care of the strategic direction for all tours within the agency's jurisdiction. And at Liaison Artists, we take care of all of our roster for North America, the majority of our roster for South America, and then we've also got a smaller roster for Australia. I negotiate all deal points for performances, things like financial offer, travel, hotel arrangements, logistics, billing, set times. Those are all deal points that I negotiate during the time of the booking. But it's not all just email and phone negotiations. I also use previous performance data like ticket history to dictate when and where we decide to route tours. So there's a lot of data involved. And then there's the artist recruitment process, which we call A&R, or artist and repertoire. Then under me is the coordinator. At Liaison, we call them coordinators, but at different agencies, they're called assistants or junior agents. These folks are primary point of contact for all travel, logistics, press, and event advertising. They approve flyers, and they also reconfirm technical and hospitality riders. Riders are essentially documents that lay out everything that an artist needs in order to perform. And they also assist with A&R, and actually in some cases, the coordinator is a vital component of that A&R because they're normally younger and they normally keep their ear to the ground a bit more on up and coming artists and what's the most hype sound at the moment. And the coordinator is also a lead agency representative during visa applications and renewals. It's a really important job as the coordinator, as a budding agent, to learn more about the politics in between country to country. A lot of the time we'll have artists from Western Europe who either need to get a visa to come into the United States, or need to get vaccinations to go to certain places in South America, things along those lines. Those are all vital components about being a very detail-oriented coordinator. And then there's two different parts of the accounting team at an agency. There's the accounts receivable. This is the person that takes care of contracts and invoicing once I confirm a show. And they also track incoming payments on financial software like QuickBooks or something along those lines. The accounts payable accountant at the agency takes care of post-tour statements, things like laying out the PDF for what each show and all the deductions, commission and flights and everything that's been taken out of the fee. And then they also field tax inquiries from the artist and management. And so, believe it or not, the majority of the time I spend is right there in that chair, at least before COVID, when it was safe to work in offices together. But it's not all just an office job either. Even though I'm in the office Monday through Friday, I'm also going out to clubs and festivals a lot. I couldn't tell you how many pictures I have of my face somewhere just smushed in very candidly in the side of a picture. I have two small examples here. That's Rodriguez Jr. with a slight headphone malfunction at Movement Festival in Detroit a couple years back. And the other one is Artelon at the Estate Rooftop in Chicago last summer. But then there's some less candid photo opportunities as well. This is at the Dirty Bird Campout in Silverado, California, with a very good promoter friend of mine from New Orleans. And then one of my favorite parts of my job is the homework. And the homework as a music agent is promos, listening to music, receiving a lot of vinyl. The promo process in 2020 is really interesting. Normally, I get a couple emails a week from different publicists or management companies, and I'll get the MP3, I'll be able to stream it, and then I can't actually download it unless I give feedback. So I like to give as much positive feedback as possible, 5 stars out of 5, download that file. And then one of the reasons I've got the iMac behind me is because I've got quite a few lossless MP3s, as you can imagine, waves and apes and whatnot there. So got a huge hard drive, and I'm acquiring music all the time. But things have changed with COVID. So how have these individual roles that I've laid out, how have they changed? As we go through all of these very unique examples, it's important to keep in mind that these business models that I'm about to show you are not sustainable. They're just Band-Aids on a larger wound that is the pandemic. A lot of these creative ways that people are weathering the pandemic is taking care of the following two things. Number one, minimize losses during the pandemic. And two, very important, maintaining brand recognition. So let's start out with the venue side adaptations to the pandemic. So here we've got all different venues in the city of San Francisco with various levels of examples of large scale parklets. So I didn't know what a parklet was prior to the pandemic. Parklets are these street spaces that have been overtaken. They used to be parking spaces, or in some cases, areas for bus stops and whatnot. Those have been kind of refitted to allow for socially distant tables and socially distant dance floors. A lot of these places can't even fit dance floors, but they're not allowed to have indoor bars. I'm not sure what the case is in Michigan at the moment, but in California, we still aren't allowed to go to certain closed spaces, a certain amount of square footage inside a bar. So I'm seeing all over the city. That's just 12 different examples that I've laid out here. That's what it looks like in a lot of the kind of bar and club neighborhoods in San Francisco. What about the industrial neighborhoods of San Francisco? So right now, there's an industrial neighborhood called the Dog Patch in San Francisco that has one nightclub in it, the Midway. And I'll play a video of what it looks like over there, but they've actually overtaken the entire street, and every Friday and Saturday and Sunday, they've been doing events. So this is what that looks like. All that yellow tape you see, they allowed 4 different people per party to go eat and drink. So you can actually take your mask off. And then there's a little VIP area in there right in front of the stage. DJs got to wear their mask the entire time. They sanitize the DJ equipment. So that's a micro scale example there. And the same thing with the parklets. These are all venues from anywhere from 1 to 150 people. What about larger venues? What if we want to do events for over 300 people in the pandemic? How do you gather that many people safely? I'll start with the bottom left example here. So this is a CNN press release. Got to give a shout out to Bay Area promoter Noah Cunningham for his drive-in concert initiative, Hotbox. They toured Mark Rebele in 18 different drive-in theaters in 18 different markets back in June. Insomniac Events here in California is doing a drive-in concert series as well. So as you can see in the middle, this is the NOS Event Center in Southern California. They're allowing for cars to park in a parking spot and then have an adjacent dance floor that you can kind of customize when you arrive. So I think that's what the stage map's going to look like there in a couple weeks. Now, the timing of this presentation is great because this weekend, one of North America's premier clubs, Space in Miami, is reopening, and it's a huge complex. It's like the Chuck E. Cheese's for raver adults. It's huge. It's 2,000. It's normally 2,000 or so capacity. This little graph that we have here on the right, this little layout, I should say, is a capacity of 300 people. So, you know, the margins, as you can imagine, are definitely nothing close to what they usually are. It's pennies on the dollar, but at least we're reopening and we're maintaining that brand recognition all the way from DJ down to venue and other examples like that. What about managers? What about managerial companies? So I have a case study here of 2+2 Management's office in downtown Los Angeles. They've turned their space from an office into a full-on visual art studio. So live streaming DJs, filming music videos, and artist promo pics are just some of the creative ways that this company has kept the office in use. So the first video I'll play here is a DJ in the background, and I like this angle because you can kind of see in the foreground that it is very much still an office. And then in the middle, we've got that same office kind of being repurposed into a place to film a music video. And then we've got that music video being filmed in action. I think there's a bit of a lag, at least there is on my end, but I think you get the point. This is a good example of how a managerial company has literally kept the lights on in the office by renting out their space for various visual arts performers. What about artist adaptations? So I'll lay out only 3 artist adaptations here in this presentation, but everybody's doing very, very creative things. The first thing I'll explain is a sample pack. So Archie Hamilton and Guy J are offering sample packs for sale now. A sample pack is a collection of sounds intended for music producers to use to produce music. These sounds can come in a variety of different forms: percussion, vocal samples, sound effects, and so on. So what Archie in the UK and Guy in Malta have done is they've actually taken a microphone, recorded their own drums, vocal samples, sound effects, and have been able to monetize that and sell that on different platforms. In Guy's case, he's using Patreon, which is a membership platform that makes it easy for creators to get paid. And then Archie's doing the same thing via Sample Market. Well, that's just one way to produce music. What about DJing music? So there's 2 different examples of artists from my roster who are doing live streams platforms. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Twitch. I was relatively familiar with Twitch prior to the pandemic, but now it's a huge part of my job. Twitch is a live streaming video platform that also allows artists to monetize, in Twitch's case, in the form of fan subscriptions and live tipping. So Good TV is a good example. That is a new platform that Artelon, Justin Martin, Christian Martin, Vanessa, and Walker and Royce just started. Those are all artists in the house music realm. And then Desert Hearts, who's my client based in Southern California, they have one of Twitch's largest music accounts at the moment. And the captain of the Desert Hearts ship, Mikey Lyon, who's that top left, very colorful guy in that little array there on the right-hand side, he's based out of Los Angeles. He's got a weekly show on Twitch. And then Koyu in Barcelona in the top right in the soccer jersey, he is also doing a lot of things on Twitch out of his clothing store, Suara music label as well. And then Marbs from Desert Hearts on the bottom right, and then Dosum in Girona, Spain over on the left. And then some more examples of live streaming, and Sarah Landry in Austin, Texas here doing a Beatport live stream. Beatport is a digital download network for MP3s and electronic music. This is Sarah's little studio setup. And then we've got the German duo Panpot performing not so much in a studio, but actually on a boat in the Spree River in Berlin. And some more artist adaptations. So another really exciting way that artists have adopted is by becoming teachers. So Anna here founded the On Away Studio Masterclass, and that announcement just came a couple of days ago, alongside Weba, another DJ and producer. That's in Barcelona, Spain. So you can sign up for their masterclass, and they're going to use their skill set as producers to educate other producers on how to create a song from start to finish. Ardalan is doing something similar in San Francisco. He joined up with the IO Music Academy to do a couple hours each day, Monday through Friday, a couple weeks ago, to teach up and coming producers certain fundamentals in production software. So what about agents and agencies? As you can see here, I'm in the home office, and I will continue to be in the home office until at least the end of 2020. So agencies have adapted by working remotely, and that's pretty much true across all industries, and booking events much further in advance. So not many live events happening in the next couple of months. Prior to COVID, a ideal sweet spot for booking shows would be about 4 to 10 months out for clubs and about 12 to 15 months out for festivals. That number increased exponentially. I was talking to my brother, who's a talent buyer for AEG Presents Rocky Mountains in Denver, and he's booking Red Rocks and the Mission Ballroom, these very large scale venues, into the June, July, August 2022 calendar, which is pretty crazy to think about. And then another really interesting thing that I personally have been getting into is delving into the growing field of data analytics. So there are a ton of resources on topics like data visualization and business analytics that can help agents and agencies make more data-driven decisions. Even in the last 2 or 3 months, I've been able to take booking data from Liaison's booking software called Overture and drive insights and eliminate inefficiencies and work smarter. And there's a lot of different examples of that, but so much of the time agents have just been looking one-dimensionally at when shows play out, like, oh, April and May are really busy, Coachella and a lot of these bigger festivals, and then September and October are really busy, school's back in session, and Halloween's a huge holiday in North America. But one thing that we haven't looked at is taking a deeper look under the hood and looking at insights like why January and February are huge booking months, even though it's pretty dead in North America because it's colder and everybody's getting back in the swing of things. So after the holidays, so there's a lot of really interesting insights that data science and data analytics, now that the pandemic has hit, I've been able to really kind of take a pause and kind of have a bigger balcony perspective and see, these different kind of business intelligence insights that I can drive. Last but not least, huge shout out to my colleague Bailey Greenwood at Liaison Artists for founding the Bay Area Music Community, which is a group of people mobilizing industry professionals to lobby local and federal policymakers. So that's anywhere from the city, state, and federal level. And we'll get into that in a moment here. So there's going to be 5 different ways that the electronic music industry will survive, at least 5 that I'll lay out in the following slide. But first and foremost, it's going to come down to federal aid now that we're about 6-7 months in. This current business model is not going to work with so little events. And even though there's a lot of really interesting creative things that a lot of people are doing, there's going to need to be some federal initiatives across the board in order to keep everybody afloat. So I'm offering 3 different countries examples here. I'll start with the United States. In the green font, that is NIVA, which is the National Independent Venue Association, and they are here to preserve and nurture the ecosystem of independent live music venues and promoters throughout the United States. There are currently 3 different bills in Congress that are sitting collecting dust, unfortunately. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but a couple days ago, President Trump made a decision to vow not to pass any stimulus bills until after the election. So a lot of different people in the music industry have been pushing these 3 different bills. It's the Save Our Stages Act, the Heroes Act, and the Restart Act. They all have differing but similar themes in order to get federal stimulus funding in order to keep a lot of these businesses afloat. So federal initiatives is going to be survival tactic number 1. Survival tactic number 2, minimizing losses by taking action now. You know, I'm sure everybody's mentality has changed in the last couple of months. Mine sure has, but I just remember in March and April thinking, I think it's going to be okay for a lot of these artists who want to sit still. But now that we're in October, sitting still and waiting it out isn't really an option anymore. Even if you're the biggest DJ in the world, that there's still some brand recognition to maintain. So, you know, I hope we're not just getting started. I hope that we're pretty far into this pandemic, but if we're not, you know, we're going to need to adapt. So maintaining brand recognition is really important. Getting on Twitch, YouTube, SoundCloud, making music, releasing music. And then creating new revenue streams is number 4. That's, you know, become a music instructor, book drive-in concerts, get creative, rent out your office space you're not using. And then finally, monetizing skill sets that you already have. In the case of Guy J and Archie Hamilton, you know, they have all these sound effects that they're creating for their own music. Why don't they bunch them all up and monetize it by selling sample packs? You're a DJ, perform on Twitch, get those tips and those subscriptions. Create new merchandise. A lot of the, you know, Koyu, that Spaniard that I showed a couple slides ago, he's got a beautiful store and record label. Suara is actually a record label for techno and for cats, and that's literally one of their taglines, and it's great. He's creating all these different new clothing lines via that platform as well. And then finally, leveraging data. I use data all the time. You know, ticket history, all the data on Overture. There's a way now to make my job as an agent more pandemic proof, and that is during the time of the stillness, really driving a lot of insights and finding a lot of inefficiencies within our agency. So we're living in, I think I'll go as far to say that we are living in the most bizarre and uncertain moment of our lives. So instead of anxiously waiting around, let's take a big picture look at everything that got us to this point. I love this quote by Ryan Holiday. I'm going to end with this, and that is, in life, it doesn't matter what happens to you or where you come from. It matters what you do with what happens and what you've been given. And the only way you'll do something spectacular is by using it all to your advantage. And that's what those 6 different job titles in electronic music are currently doing. So everyone on this Zoom call has had a very unique background, but one common trait is, as bachelors of business administration, you're gaining vital knowledge and awareness of strategies that produce results. So I hope that some of the strategies that you saw today inspire you to push through the entirety of this challenging and bizarre time in our history. Thank you very much. And last and never least, Go Blue.
Awesome. Thank you, Jon. So we have a couple of questions that came in via our form that we'll touch on right now. And then also leave some room in there as well for you guys to ask any questions that you have. Start with this first one here. It says, people always say that music and agency life is hard to break into. How do you stay strong and resilient through those tough years?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it definitely is very tough to break through. It's the sort of industry where who do you know kind of thing. And you know, that's one thing that doesn't change as you climb the ladder. And when you say those tough years, I think, you know, at least I think back to when I was a junior agent at Bullet, and those tough years mean, you know, when people don't treat you well off the bat, it's either because they don't think you're going to climb that ladder, or honestly, some people are afraid of your growth. So either way, to me, those were 2 different divergent ways that I've felt motivated. So hunker down, nose to keyboard, and just hustle. That would be my best advice there.
Sure. We also have this question. It's kind of touched on in your presentation, but you can elaborate if you want. How do you see COVID changing the music industry in the long term?
I think that's a great question. And actually, in the presentation, I talked about the Band-Aid kind of metaphor on what's gonna keep people afloat in the interim, but I didn't really dig into long term. So what I think first and foremost, I thought live streaming might have just been kind of trendy to begin with, but everybody's live streaming now, and it's not going to get old. I also think that the aging demographic of clubbers, people getting into their 30s and even 40s, they're not going to want to go to the clubs until 4 or 5, 6 in the morning. They're going to want to have streaming capabilities at times that are more appropriate for them. So I think live streaming will become a major component of an artist's profile. And I also think that there's going to be clauses in contracts, you know, once the pandemic is eradicated, there's going to be a lot more live streaming at events. And I think that there's going to be ways for promoters and artists to all monetize from that. So I also think that permanently the nature of offers are going to change. There's a previous presentation I did for the Michigan Electronic Music Collective in April that really dug deep into what offer structures look like. But just to give you a very broad overview, flat guarantee offers are very common in North America. And what that means is, hey, artist, I'll pay you X regardless of how the show performs. I think that's going to change big time. I think that a lot of the risk is going to be shared between the artists and the promoters. I think there's going to be a lot more tiered ticket scaling. I think that there's going to be tiered bonus structures. You know, hey, if you sell 200 tickets, we'll give you this fee. If you sell 300 tickets, you know, so there's going to be a lot more tiered ticketing, and the ticket prices will be fluctuated based on how many tickets are sold.
All kinds of changes. Another one we have here is, what is your biggest piece of advice for an undergrad wanting to do what you do one day?
I would say there's that answer is twofold, because if there's no pandemic, I would say go to shows, go to shows, go to every show you can, and you know, don't get too drunk, network, you know, be humble, but you know, don't be obnoxious, right? Just you know, it's very uncomfortable to go to a show and have that wristband because you're an agent. You know, every October I used to go to, well, I mean, ideally we'll still be going every October, but next weekend is the Amsterdam Dance Event, which is the Comic-Con of electronic music. Everybody goes in the industry. It's happening now, but on a virtual scale. So I'm not going to be shipping over to Amsterdam in a couple weeks, but I found myself so many times as an up and coming junior agent, a couple years after graduation, I'd be going to shows where a lot of my European counterparts would be there, and they'd be doing their European thing. And I just, you know, I've been trading emails with them and I've been talking to them so much, but they don't actually know what I look like. And I just kind of go in there and just dive in head first and say, hey, I'm Jon Sax from Liaison Artists. And, you know, have those uncomfortable conversations at the beginning, break that ice. But again, there's got to be some finesse there as well, right? Don't be obnoxious. Make sure that you're in a good place. And, you know, just remain humble and let your work speak for itself, because like I said earlier, you really got to make sure that you're treating everybody with respect. You know, I don't know how many of us have seen Entourage here with the dynamic between an agent and their associate. That's, you know, that's not the vibe. That's not the culture at Liaison Artists. We treat everybody with a very high amount of respect. Everybody who sits in that office, everybody who's at that table is just, you know, electronic music is their life first and foremost. And so my best advice would be, you know, if COVID wasn't happening, go to as many shows as you can, join a street team, be humble, do everything that people recommend that you do, and, you know, just stick up for yourself. Totally.
Yeah. And this last one we have here from our submitted questions, before we can open it up a little bit for anyone here who wants to ask something, is how do I start building relationships in the industry? Is that an important part of your job?
Yeah, so it's almost all of it, you know. There's so many different things that are important. Building relationships is a vital component of any sales position. And yes, being a music agent is a sales position, absolutely. The relationship that you have with promoters, you know, and that dynamic, that agent talent buyer dynamic, that's really important. But the relationship that you have with managers can lead you to bigger clients. The relationship you have with publicists can lead you to bigger clients. The relationship you have with promoters and street teamers can all lead you to bigger clients. That's why you need to treat everybody with a very high amount of respect, because somebody who's, you know, just getting started on the street team might be a superstar power agent in 5 years, and they'll remember when you were backstage and introducing them to other people. So, you know, it's a two-way street, and it always has been. And, you know, my heart breaks for people getting into the industry right now because there's no shows to go to, you know. So with the exception of, you know, great platforms like Ross EDM and stuff like that, there's not really much networking happening. So any platform that you can create a dialogue, you know, get on there, get your hands dirty, and just do everything you can to maintain that brand recognition. I'm a brand. As an agent, I am a brand. And then that's even independent of Liaison too. When I moved from Bullet to Liaison, I had a very uncomfortable situation asking my clients to come with me. Fortunately, the ones that I asked, they all said yes. But ultimately, when you sign up with an agency, you're signing up with an agent.
Yeah, those relationships are really everything then, for sure. If you guys have anything you want to ask about the presentation, music industry, being an agent, go ahead and just shoot.
What made you interested in the electronic music space over other genres?
That's a great question. So I've been music oriented my whole life. My dad really got me into the Grateful Dead as a kid. My brother really got me into punk and metal as an adolescent and through middle school and high school. He's only a year older than me, so we went to so many shows together. But what really got me into electronic music was actually coming from suburban Detroit. My dad, when I was about a sophomore in high school, was like, hey, there's a free all ages techno festival downtown movement. This was, I don't even want to tell you this was Movement Festival in 2003. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to go. Let's go. It's something to do. I was 14 years old at the time. Everything that's cool these days is 18 and up, So yeah, sure, I'll go. And I saw Jeff Mills perform on the main stage as a headliner at Movement Festival that year. And my life has never been the same. There's nothing like electronic music. You can listen to electronic music in your earbuds, but if you're in a 15,000 person concrete bowl with that ribcage rumbling bass, and it's so inclusionary. The great thing about house and techno music in particular is that it's so inclusionary. I can't really speak for a lot of different electronic music genres, not to sound like an old fart or anything like that, but house and techno especially, that realm that Liaison's bread and butter really is. There's such an inclusionary component to our culture, and I think that comes out in the music as well. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I personally was drawn to electronic music.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going off of that, I was just wondering if you could speak to like maybe how different genres or like different subsects of the music industry kind of operate. So maybe like how the electronic music industry might differ from another genre, whether it's pop, hip hop, rap, country, whatever. And then maybe like if you've seen different, like those different genres like approach handling COVID in different ways, just by the nature of the kind of like music and shows they put on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Logan. That's a good it's a very good question to ask, because what I've noticed, I mean, like I said, my brother works in rock and punk and metal and things like that, and he is, it differs genres by genre depending on a lot of factors, the culture being one of them, but also the amount of tickets that are sold. So one of San Francisco's largest venues, the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, can have 10,000 people in there, and that's going to have that. In order to turn the lights on in a venue that large, you're going to need to have there's only going to be some certain popular genres that are going to work, and then there's different clubs. San Francisco has such a booming and healthy music scene in general that you don't have that kind of competition for venues in smaller venues, like 100 to 200 cap rock venues. You'll never see a DJ play in there, and vice versa. Just because there's so many, the city's so versatile and there's so many different venues that were built for different sounds. I'll use Ann Arbor as an example. Is the Blind Pig still around?
Yeah, it is.
So very rarely there would be DJs playing the Blind Pig. It's happened. In fact, the fellow Michigan alum, Matthew Deere, also known as Audion, would play there a lot. But then Necto nightclub, where I was marketing director from 2008 to 2010, they really do more dance music stuff. And actually, we were the first people to bring Deadmau5 to Michigan back in 2008, which was huge. We also brought Above and Beyond and a lot of different house and techno artists there, but that's because that's how Necto's built. Necto 30, 40 years ago used to be called the Nectarine Ballroom, and they booked George Thorogood. If you guys don't know, it's the Bad to the Bone guy. And it used to be a live venue, but I can touch on that. And then I hope that answered your first question. The second question about how different genres have weathered COVID. I can only speak to how my brothers and the rock and roll side of things has dealt with it, which is booking much farther out. And then how the dance music side has dealt with it, which is, all those different creative ways that I've laid out in the presentation that all kind of, solve some short-term problems, but definitely not long-term.
Totally. Awesome. Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So you had mentioned like kind of before your like day-to-day jobs included like booking venues and stuff like that. Since COVID, how has your like day-to-day responsibilities changed? Like what are like the tasks and stuff that you're doing on a daily basis now?
That's a great question, Kara. So a lot of the things, let's just say like my workload has been, it's been reduced quite significantly. And that is because at any given week, I would book, anywhere from 10 to 30 shows. So I was doing like about 600 shows a year when we're going full throttle. So, that means anywhere from 5, 10, 15 shows every weekend. So some day-to-day stuff that was happening pre-COVID was I was making sure my coordinator was sending out itineraries and booking flights, and, I was closing tours. But there's none of that. The touring side is completely done right now, or not done, I should say, but it's completely paused right now. So those day-to-day tasks, they're not happening. What's happening instead now is, every couple of weeks now, I'll check in with managers and artists and say, can you give me a rundown of what's happening in the music production pipeline? Can you give me a rundown of what's happening from a PR perspective? I'll talk to their publicist and I'll say, is there any kind of initiative like that Good TV channel that Ardalan and his colleague and his fellow peers, DJ peers, just really came out with? So the day-to-day has changed drastically. There's been a lot less work to do, but there's different ways to weather that. And one thing that I've gotten into a lot is data science, like I was talking about in the presentation, and that's been really interesting. Just coming up with different insights that you never really saw. I'm actually reading a book right now. It's actually within arm's reach, called The Signal and the Noise. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of it, by Nate Silver. And it's really cool. I bring this up because the title is called The Signal and the Noise. And what that metaphorically means is, how do we extract the data from all of this data? There's so much data in the aggregate in the world. How do we take that insight that we want, that signal? And that's one of the questions I'm trying to answer right now, during the stillness of the pandemic.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you bring up that book, John? We were just talking about that in my marketing class today. So
highly recommend it. I'm not too far into it so far, but as I tell more and more friends, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm getting into data science. They're like, you got to read that one. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, sure. I don't know what your time is looking like, but if we have like one or two more questions, what's that?
Yeah.
I have a question really quick. You mentioned before, like as an agent working with like artists and publicists, I was wondering like when you're making like booking venues and stuff like that, what like the lawyer's role plays like in that process at all?
Totally. That's a great question. Now, for bigger events, for larger scale events, I'll first say every contract that we draw up, a lawyer has written. So I'm not sitting there as an agent. There's some boilerplate things, but I send out a confirmation email to my accounts receivable accountant at the company, and then he'll draft from a boilerplate software. He'll generate, date, fee, venue, all those things. But there's all the clauses in there about the promotion and the deposit schedule. When the contract needs to be signed, when the money needs to be sent. That language was actually drawn up by a lawyer. So in the day-to-day perspective, the lawyer, we'd pay somebody to draft up a contract. There's other situations where, say, somebody defaults on a payment or doesn't send a payment, or we need to chase somebody and it's within the confines of the United States. We have had to lawyer up before and say, hey, this promoter in so-and-so city is doing this. Or in some cases, this is quite rare, but in the last 10 years, I've had this happen, I think 2 or 3 times. And that is, people will just promote an event that they had never booked. And somebody will just say, hey, I've got Pan Pot in St. Louis on Friday, September 15th. And it's like, I didn't book that. And then Pan Pot's manager is like, what is this? And they show me this flyer, and it's got their pictures from like 10 years ago on it. I don't know what the motive is there, but we've had to send cease and desist letters to people like that. Sometimes it's, in retaliation. Other times it's just people trying to get a rise out of their friends and stuff. But, if it gets to a level where it gets our attention, then that's another situation where a lawyer will come up. But the most common way that we use lawyers and in the entertainment industry, at least in the electronic music industry, we have immigration lawyers at Liaison that we have on retainer that take care of O1 and P1 visas. In the United States, the process to get a non-immigrant work visa is extremely convoluted. And unfortunately, COVID has only exacerbated that. Each artist needs to have a 3-year visa itinerary that they submit to the United States Customs and Immigration Services. And then the immigration lawyer needs to sign off on that paperwork. So we can't just submit it ourselves. It's got to come from somebody, a Juris Doctor. It's got to come from a lawyer. So I would say those are probably the 3 or 4 most common ways that law is involved in my line of work.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm. I will just say that this one thing completely unrelated. I don't know if I hammered this home hard enough on the presentation, but saveourstages.com is the website that you guys could just go on and locate even if you're not from the state of Michigan. In fact, if you're from a different state, it'd be nice to get a nice mix of different people. But you can go at saveyourstages.com and type in your zip code, and you can get some literature that you can send along to your congressman. Fighting to get a lot of this stuff back on board. It's not just to save the industry, it's also just to make sure that there's all those smaller venues that you love, to allow them to survive this pandemic. Another thing, obviously, I checked in the state of Michigan. I believe the voter registration deadline for online vote, or for mail-in voting rather, is October 19th. So be on the lookout for that, and be sure to vote on November 3rd, y'all, as well. Just wanted to give that little plug before I forgot.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I saw too that there is a Save Our Stages virtual concert fundraiser thing going on next week.
Yeah, good to know. I did not know that actually, but yeah, there's a lot of it gets lost in all the live streams that are going on these days, but that's very good to know, Christian. Appreciate you letting us know that. For
sure, yeah. And so I think that'll wrap it up for today. Thanks so much, John, for doing this.
Thank you.
Learned a lot. Hope everyone learned a lot. And yeah, see y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Take care.